The silence was deafening, broken only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, a clock that now felt like a mocking reminder of the time I had wasted. The legal documents felt heavy in my trembling hands, each page a testament to my shattered life. They had taken everything. Every single thing I had worked for, everything we had built together, vanished with the stroke of a pen. My name is Heather, and this was the day they thought they had broken me completely. They thought I would crumble, disappear, and never be heard from again. If you truly love your sister, subscribe now. I met Mark during my senior year of college. He was charming, witty, and everything I thought I wanted in a partner. His family, the illustrious and seemingly benevolent Thompsons, welcomed me with open arms. They were wealthy, influential, and appeared to genuinely care about my happiness. His parents, Richard and Alina, treated me like the daughter they never had, showering me with affection and extravagant gifts. They funded our wedding, a fairy-tale affair that I believed marked the beginning of our forever. I foolishly thought I had found my place, a secure and loving haven within their gilded world. Mark and I started a small business together, a boutique that catered to the high-end clientele of our town. I poured my heart and soul into it, sacrificing sleep, weekends, and any semblance of a social life. The business thrived, becoming a local favorite and a significant source of income for our family. I trusted Mark implicitly, handling the creative aspects while he managed the finances, a division of labor that seemed perfectly balanced at the time. We were a team, or so I thought. The first sign of trouble came subtly, disguised as concern. Richard began to question my business decisions, suggesting alternative strategies, always with a patronizing smile and a thinly veiled implication that I wasn't quite capable enough. Alina would offer unsolicited advice on everything from my wardrobe to my home decor, her words laced with a condescending sweetness that stung more than any outright insult. I brushed it off, attributing it to their overbearing personalities and their desire to control every aspect of Mark's life, a pattern I had observed since day one. Mark, always the dutiful son, sided with his parents, dismissing my concerns as paranoia and assuring me that they only wanted what was best for us. The subtle jabs escalated into blatant interference. Richard started making unilateral decisions about the business, overriding my authority and alienating my employees. Alina began to undermine my relationship with Mark, whispering doubts in his ear and subtly manipulating him against me. The once loving atmosphere of our home turned cold and hostile. Mark became distant, withdrawn, and increasingly critical of everything I did. He started working late, offering flimsy excuses and avoiding my attempts to connect. I felt like I was losing him, slowly but surely, to the insidious influence of his parents. Then came the bombshell. Mark announced that he wanted a divorce. He claimed we had grown apart, that our visions for the future no longer aligned, and that he simply wasn't happy. I was devastated, blindsided by his sudden change of heart. I pleaded with him to reconsider, to work through our problems, but he remained unmoved, his eyes cold and distant. As the divorce proceedings began, I quickly realized that this wasn't just a simple separation. The Thompsons were determined to strip me of everything. They hired the most ruthless lawyers in town, meticulously dissecting our finances and twisting every detail to their advantage. Mark, under their influence, accused me of financial mismanagement, claiming that I had squandered our assets and driven the business into the ground. I was shocked and disgusted by his lies, by his willingness to betray me so completely. The legal battle was brutal and relentless. The Thompsons used their wealth and power to intimidate witnesses, manipulate evidence, and drag the proceedings out for months, draining my resources and wearing me down emotionally. I fought back as best as I could, but I was no match for their combined forces. In the end, they succeeded. The judge ruled in their favor, awarding them the business, the house, and the majority of our assets. I was left with nothing but a few personal belongings and a mountain of legal debt. I was broken, defeated, and utterly alone. As I stood there in the rain, watching them celebrate their victory, I knew that I couldn't let them get away with it. They had taken everything from me, but they had underestimated my resolve. They thought I was weak, but they were wrong. They had awakened a sleeping giant, and they were about to face the consequences. The person I trusted most was one of them. The rain mirrored the storm inside me as I walked away from the courthouse, the Thompsons' triumphant laughter echoing in my ears. The weight of injustice pressed down on me, suffocating me with each step. My life, once filled with promise and happiness, was now a desolate wasteland. Sleep became a luxury I could no longer afford. Night after night, I lay awake, replaying the events of the past few years, searching for answers, for some glimmer of hope in the darkness. The faces of Mark, Richard, and Alina haunted my dreams, their smiles twisted into grotesque masks of deceit and cruelty. I tried to understand how the people I had loved and trusted could betray me so completely, how they could orchestrate such a calculated and heartless scheme to destroy me. The silence of my empty apartment amplified my despair. The walls seemed to close in on me, trapping me in a prison of my own making. I missed the warmth of our home, the laughter that once filled its rooms, the simple joys of everyday life that I had taken for granted. Now all that remained was a hollow ache, a constant reminder of what I had lost. I attempted to salvage what was left of my life. I reached out to friends and family, seeking their support and understanding. But many of them, intimidated by the Thompsons' wealth and influence, distanced themselves from me, offering polite condolences but wary of getting involved. I felt isolated and alone, adrift in a sea of uncertainty and fear. Desperate for income, I started applying for jobs, but my resume, once impressive with my business achievements, was now tainted by the stain of the divorce and the accusations of financial mismanagement. Employers were hesitant to hire me, wary of the potential legal complications or the negative publicity associated with my case. Rejection after rejection chipped away at my confidence, deepening my sense of hopelessness. I even tried to start a new business, pouring my remaining savings into a small online venture. But without the resources and connections I had once possessed, I struggled to gain traction, and the business quickly floundered, leaving me even deeper in debt. The Thompsons' shadow loomed large over every aspect of my life, suffocating my attempts to rebuild and move on. They seemed determined to crush me completely, to ensure that I would never recover from their betrayal. One evening, while sifting through the wreckage of my personal belongings, I stumbled upon a box of old photographs. I sat down on the floor, tears streaming down my face as I relived the memories captured in those images. There were pictures of Mark and me, young and in love, laughing and exploring the world together. There were pictures of the Thompsons, smiling and welcoming me into their family. The contrast between the joyful past and the devastating present was unbearable. As I flipped through the photos, I noticed something odd. In several of the pictures, Richard and Alina exchanged knowing glances, subtle smirks that seemed out of place in the context of the moment. I paused, studying the images more closely, trying to decipher the hidden meaning behind their expressions. A chilling realization began to dawn on me. Their affection, their generosity, their seemingly innocent advice, it was all a carefully constructed facade, a calculated manipulation designed to control me and ultimately steal everything I had worked for. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. I remembered the subtle digs, the undermining comments, the constant interference in my business decisions. It wasn't just overbearing personalities, it was a deliberate strategy to weaken my position and isolate me from Mark. They had been planning this for years, patiently waiting for the opportune moment to strike. The anger that had been simmering beneath the surface finally erupted. My vision blurred, and the glass in my hand shattered into a million pieces. I was no longer just sad or defeated. I was consumed by a burning rage, a fierce determination to seek justice for the wrongs that had been done to me. I knew that I couldn't let them get away with it. I wouldn't allow them to destroy my life and walk away unscathed. I had to fight back, to expose their lies and reveal their true nature to the world. But I also knew that I couldn't confront them directly. They were too powerful, too cunning. I needed a plan, a strategy that would allow me to strike back from the shadows, to dismantle their empire from within. And so, I began to plot my revenge. I started meticulously documenting every detail of their scheme, gathering evidence of their deceit and manipulation. I spent hours poring over financial records, legal documents, and personal correspondence, searching for inconsistencies and hidden motives. I reached out to former employees, business associates, and even estranged family members, piecing together the puzzle of their corrupt empire. Slowly but surely, I began to uncover a web of lies, betrayals, and illicit activities that extended far beyond my own personal experience. The Thompsons were not just ruthless in their personal lives. They were engaged in a wide range of unethical and potentially illegal practices, from tax evasion to corporate fraud. The more I learned, the more determined I became to bring them down. I knew that it wouldn't be easy. They had built their wealth and power over decades, and they would stop at nothing to protect their reputation. But I was no longer the naive and trusting young woman they had once manipulated. I was a survivor, hardened by adversity and fueled by a burning desire for justice. I was ready to play their game, to use their own tactics against them. I would smile, act broken, and lull them into a false sense of security. But beneath the surface, I would be meticulously planning their downfall, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. They thought they had broken me. They believed I would crawl away, defeated, and lick my wounds in silence. They were wrong. But the road ahead was dark, filled with obstacles I couldn't yet comprehend. My days turned into a monotonous cycle of job rejections, bill collectors, and the gnawing emptiness of my apartment. The electricity was cut off, plunging me into darkness each evening, a fitting metaphor for my life. I huddled under blankets, rationing the last of my meager food supply, feeling like a ghost haunting the ruins of my former existence. The humiliation was a constant companion, whispering doubts and insecurities into my ear. I avoided running into anyone I knew, ashamed of my circumstances and terrified of their pity. The weight of my legal debt grew heavier with each passing day, threatening to crush me completely. I considered selling my remaining possessions, but even that wouldn't make a dent in the overwhelming sum. I felt trapped, suffocated by the Thompsons' relentless pursuit. One particularly bleak morning, I received an eviction notice. The finality of the document sent a shockwave through my body. I had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. The thought of living on the streets, of becoming a nameless statistic, filled me with despair. I sat on the floor, clutching the eviction notice, tears streaming down my face. It felt like the end of the line, the absolute bottom. I thought about giving up, of letting the Thompsons win. The darkness seemed to beckon, offering a release from the pain and humiliation. But then, a flicker of defiance ignited within me. I remembered my grandmother, a woman who had faced unimaginable hardships with unwavering courage and resilience. She had taught me the importance of standing up for myself, of never allowing anyone to diminish my spirit. Her words echoed in my mind, a lifeline in the sea of despair. I wiped away my tears, took a deep breath, and stood up. I refused to let the Thompsons break me. I refused to surrender to the darkness. I would fight back, not for revenge, but for my own survival, for the chance to reclaim my life. The first step was to find a way to survive. I swallowed my pride and swallowed my fear and applied for any job I could find. I worked long hours, cleaning toilets and serving coffee, earning just enough to keep a roof over my head and food on the table. The work was physically and emotionally draining, but it gave me a sense of purpose, a feeling that I was still capable of something. I spent my evenings researching the Thompsons, delving into their past, their business dealings, and their personal lives. I discovered a network of secrets and scandals, a web of deceit that extended far beyond their treatment of me. I learned about their shady financial practices, their involvement in questionable investments, and their exploitation of their employees. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that they were not the benevolent philanthropists they portrayed themselves to be. They were ruthless and greedy, willing to do anything to protect their wealth and power. I started documenting everything, meticulously collecting evidence of their wrongdoings. I knew that I couldn't expose them on my own. I needed allies, people who had been hurt by them, people who were willing to stand up and fight for justice. I began reaching out to former employees, business partners, and even family members, sharing my story and gathering information. Many were hesitant to get involved, fearing the Thompsons' retribution. But some were willing to help, offering their own stories and evidence to support my claims. Slowly but surely, I began to build a case against them, a case that would expose their lies and bring them to justice. I knew that it would be a long and difficult battle, but I was no longer afraid. I had nothing left to lose. The Thompsons had taken everything from me, but they had underestimated my resolve. They had awakened a sleeping giant, and they were about to face the consequences. I would use their own greed, their own arrogance against them. I would turn their world upside down, exposing their secrets and dismantling their empire from within. I transformed. The naive, trusting woman they had manipulated was gone. In her place stood a cold, calculating strategist focused on a single goal: justice. I started meticulously planning their downfall, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. I began to see their weaknesses. Their biggest weakness: they thought they were untouchable. They believed that their wealth and power insulated them from any consequences. They had grown complacent, arrogant, and careless. They underestimated me, assuming that I was too broken and defeated to pose a threat. That was their biggest mistake. I used their assumptions against them, playing the role of the broken victim, lulling them into a false sense of security. I smiled politely, offered condolences, and even feigned forgiveness. But beneath the surface, I was meticulously plotting their downfall, gathering evidence, and building my case. I knew that I needed to be patient, to wait for the perfect moment to strike. I couldn't afford to make any mistakes. The Thompsons were ruthless and cunning, and they would stop at nothing to protect themselves. But I was determined to outsmart them, to use their own tactics against them. I would turn their world upside down, exposing their secrets and dismantling their empire from within. The day they tried to end me was the day revenge was born. I smiled, I played their game, but I was recording everything. The first step was gaining access. They had cut me off from everything, but their arrogance provided an opening. They still saw me as Mark's ex-wife, someone who belonged, at least peripherally, to their world. Invitations to charity events, social gatherings, I accepted them all. I plastered on a gracious smile, offered polite conversation, and acted the part of the wounded but recovering woman. All the while, I was observing, listening, and gathering information. I needed to know their routines, their habits, their vulnerabilities. I focused on their home, a sprawling estate that was both a fortress and a treasure trove of secrets. Security cameras guarded every entrance, but I knew there were blind spots. I spent weeks studying the layout, analyzing the camera angles, and mapping out the patrol routes of the security guards. I needed a way to get inside without being detected. One evening, at a gala hosted by the Thompsons, I struck up a conversation with a former employee, a disgruntled IT technician who had been unfairly dismissed. He was bitter and resentful, eager to share his grievances. Over several glasses of champagne, I learned about the estate's security system, its vulnerabilities, and the access codes used by the staff. He even provided me with a detailed schematic of the network infrastructure, a roadmap to the Thompsons' digital world. It was a risky move, trusting a stranger, but I had a feeling that he was genuine in his desire to see the Thompsons brought down. With the technician's information in hand, I began to formulate a plan. I needed to bypass the security system, gain access to their computers, and retrieve the evidence I needed to expose their crimes. I knew that it wouldn't be easy. The Thompsons were sophisticated and tech-savvy, and their security measures were state-of-the-art. But I was determined to find a way. I spent hours researching hacking techniques, learning about firewalls, encryption, and intrusion detection systems. I even took an online course in cybersecurity, immersing myself in the world of digital espionage. The more I learned, the more confident I became. I realized that the Thompsons' arrogance had made them vulnerable. They had become complacent, relying on their technology to protect them, forgetting the human element. I would exploit that weakness, using their own technology against them. I acquired the necessary tools: a high-powered laptop, a sophisticated hacking toolkit, and a burner phone for anonymous communication. I practiced my hacking skills in a virtual environment, honing my techniques and testing my vulnerabilities. I created a fake identity, complete with a fabricated backstory and forged credentials. I needed to be able to move freely in their world without raising suspicion. One afternoon, I received an invitation to a small gathering at the Thompsons' home. It was an opportunity I couldn't pass up. I knew that it would be risky, but I needed to get inside to plant the seeds of my plan. I arrived at the estate dressed in a designer gown, my hair perfectly styled, my face carefully made up. I played the part of the sophisticated socialite, engaging in polite conversation, sipping champagne, and pretending to enjoy the company of my former tormentors. All the while, I was scanning the environment, looking for opportunities, for weaknesses in their defenses. I noticed that Richard, the Thompsons' son, was particularly arrogant and careless. He boasted about his wealth, his connections, and his ability to get away with anything. He seemed to revel in his power, flaunting his disregard for the law and for the feelings of others. I decided to focus on him. I engaged him in conversation, flattering his ego and feigning interest in his business ventures. I learned that he was deeply involved in the Thompsons' illegal activities, that he was a key player in their scheme to defraud investors and evade taxes. He even hinted at some of their more unsavory dealings, boasting about their ability to silence anyone who threatened their empire. I knew that I had found my target. Richard was the key to unlocking the Thompsons' secrets, the weak link in their chain of power. I just needed to find a way to get close enough to exploit him. As the evening drew to a close, I made my move. I excused myself to use the restroom, but instead I slipped away to the library, a dimly lit room filled with bookshelves and antique furniture. I knew that Richard often retreated to the library to conduct business, to make phone calls, and to send emails. It was the perfect place to gather information, to plant my digital traps. I quickly scanned the room, looking for security cameras or other surveillance devices. I found one hidden in a bookshelf, disguised as a decorative object. I disabled it with a small electronic device, creating a blind spot in the Thompsons' security system. I then proceeded to Richard's computer, a sleek laptop sitting on a mahogany desk. I knew that it would be heavily protected, but I was prepared. Using the hacking tools I had acquired, I bypassed the password protection and gained access to the computer's file system. I quickly copied the contents of the hard drive to an encrypted USB drive, downloading years of financial records, emails, and other sensitive documents. I also installed a keylogger, a program that would record every keystroke entered on the computer, capturing passwords, usernames, and other confidential information. I knew that it was a risky move, but I needed to gather as much evidence as possible. I then planted a series of Trojan horses, malicious programs disguised as legitimate software that would allow me to remotely access the computer and monitor Richard's activities. I programmed the Trojans to send me alerts whenever Richard accessed certain files or visited specific websites. I wanted to know everything he was doing, to anticipate his next move. As I was finishing my work, I heard footsteps approaching the library. I quickly disconnected the USB drive, re-enabled the security camera, and returned the computer to its original state. I then slipped out of the library just as Richard entered the room. He didn't notice anything amiss. He simply smiled and nodded, oblivious to the fact that I had just stolen his secrets and planted the seeds of his destruction. I returned to the party, my heart pounding in my chest. I acted as if nothing had happened, engaging in polite conversation and pretending to enjoy myself. But inside, I was seething with excitement. I had successfully infiltrated the Thompsons' inner circle, gained access to their secrets, and planted the seeds of their downfall. The game had begun. Over the next few weeks, I meticulously analyzed the data I had stolen from Richard's computer. I discovered a treasure trove of evidence, proving the Thompsons' involvement in a wide range of illegal activities, from tax evasion to fraud to money laundering. I also uncovered evidence of their attempts to silence anyone who threatened their empire, including former employees, business partners, and even family members. The more I learned, the more determined I became to bring them to justice. I spent hours poring over financial records, legal documents, and personal correspondence, piecing together the puzzle of their corrupt empire. I created a detailed timeline of their crimes, documenting every transaction, every meeting, and every communication. I knew that I needed to present my evidence in a way that would be irrefutable, that would convince the authorities to take action. I consulted with a team of lawyers and forensic accountants, experts in their fields who were willing to help me expose the Thompsons' crimes. They helped me organize my evidence, prepare my legal strategy, and navigate the complex legal system. They also warned me about the risks involved, the potential for retaliation from the Thompsons, and the possibility that they would try to discredit me or silence me. I was prepared for the risks. I knew that the Thompsons would stop at nothing to protect their wealth and power, but I was no longer afraid. I had nothing left to lose. I was determined to fight back, to expose their lies, and to bring them to justice. I knew that it would be a long and difficult battle, but I was confident that I would prevail. I had the evidence, the expertise, and the determination to win. The Thompsons had underestimated me. They had thought that they could break me, that they could silence me, that they could get away with their crimes. They were wrong. I was about to turn their world upside down, exposing their secrets and dismantling their empire from within. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. The anticipation was almost unbearable. Each day felt like an eternity as I waited for the opportune moment to strike. I knew that I needed to be patient, to wait for the perfect moment, to maximize the impact of my revelations. The tension was building, both within me and within the Thompsons' world. I could sense that they were becoming increasingly paranoid, suspicious of everyone around them. They were starting to crack under the pressure. I knew that my plan was working. The walls were closing in. I could feel it. They started making mistakes. Careless whispers during phone calls I was now monitoring. Hasty meetings in dimly lit restaurants. The keylogger on Richard's computer was a goldmine, capturing every panic search, every deleted email, every desperate attempt to cover their tracks. It was like watching a slow-motion train wreck, and I was the conductor, gleefully pressing the accelerator. The evidence I had gathered was irrefutable. Bank statements showing illicit transfers to offshore accounts, emails detailing their scheme to defraud investors, audio recordings of their threats against former employees. It was all there, laid bare for the world to see. But I wasn't ready to go public just yet. I wanted to inflict maximum damage, to time my attack for maximum impact. I needed to lure them into a false sense of security to make them believe that they had weathered the storm. So, I continued to play the part of the wounded ex-wife, attending their social gatherings, offering polite conversation, and feigning forgiveness. They lapped it up, convinced that I was no longer a threat. They even started to confide in me, sharing their anxieties and their fears. It was almost pathetic. Their biggest weakness, they needed to feel superior. Then I found it, the smoking gun. Buried deep within Richard's encrypted files was a video of them committing the act, the darkness, the violation, the very thing they thought they had buried forever. My breath hitched. My hands trembled. This wasn't just about money or power anymore. This was about something far more profound. This was about justice. This was the key to unlocking everything. I knew exactly what to do. I needed to create a stage, a spotlight, a public forum where their sins could be exposed for all to see. I decided to leak the information to a major news outlet, a respected investigative journalism organization with a reputation for exposing corruption and wrongdoing. I crafted an anonymous email, outlining the Thompsons' crimes and providing a link to a secure file-sharing service where the evidence was stored. I made sure to include a brief summary of the video, hinting at its contents without revealing too much. I wanted to pique their interest, to make them hungry for the story. I hit send and then I waited. Every notification made my pulse spike. Each moment was pure tension. Within hours, I received a response. A journalist from the news outlet confirmed that they had received my email and were reviewing the evidence. They asked for more information, for details about my identity and my motivations. I declined to provide any personal information, insisting on remaining anonymous. I explained that I was acting out of a sense of moral obligation, that I couldn't stand by and watch as the Thompsons continued to prey on innocent victims. The journalist seemed satisfied with my explanation. They assured me that they would investigate the matter thoroughly and that they would publish their findings as soon as possible. I knew that the clock was ticking. The Thompsons were bound to discover the leak sooner or later, and they would stop at nothing to silence me. I needed to move fast, to accelerate my plan. I decided to set a trap, a public confrontation that would force them to confront their crimes and expose their lies. I knew that they were planning to host a major charity gala, a lavish affair that would attract the city's elite. It was the perfect venue for my grand finale. I secured an invitation to the gala, using my connections and my carefully cultivated persona. I knew that it would be risky, that I would be walking into the lion's den. But I was prepared to face them, to confront them with their sins, and to watch as their world crumbled around them. I had one final ace to play. I made an anonymous call to the authorities. I told them about the Thompsons' illegal activities, providing them with specific details and locations. I hinted at the existence of the video, suggesting that they obtain a warrant to search the Thompsons' estate. I knew that the authorities would be hesitant to act on an anonymous tip, but I also knew that they couldn't afford to ignore the possibility of criminal activity. The stage was set. The pieces were in place. The trap was ready to spring. All that was left was to wait for the curtain to rise. The night of the gala arrived, and I felt a surge of adrenaline coursing through my veins. I dressed in a stunning black gown, my hair perfectly styled, my makeup flawless. I wanted to look my best, to radiate confidence and power. I arrived at the venue and was immediately greeted by the Thompsons. They smiled warmly, offering polite conversation and pretending to be happy to see me. I played along, feigning gratitude and admiration. But inside, I was seething with rage. As the evening progressed, I circulated through the crowd, engaging in polite conversation, sipping champagne and observing my targets. I noticed that Richard was particularly nervous, packing back and forth and checking his phone every few minutes. I could sense that he knew something was wrong, that he was anticipating trouble. Good, let him sweat. Let him squirm. Let him feel the weight of his sins. The journalist I'd contacted was also there, discreetly observing the scene. We made eye contact, and I gave her a subtle nod. She understood. The plan was in motion. I waited for the opportune moment, for the perfect alignment of circumstances. I needed to create a distraction, to draw attention to myself and to the Thompsons. I saw my chance when Richard took the stage to make a speech. He began to drone on about the Thompsons' philanthropy, their commitment to the community, and their unwavering dedication to ethical business practices. It was all a lie, a carefully constructed facade designed to conceal their corruption and greed. I couldn't take it anymore. I raised my hand, interrupting his speech. "I have something to say," I announced, my voice clear and steady. All eyes turned to me. Richard's face paled. The Thompsons looked shocked. The crowd went silent. This was it, the final act. The moment of truth. I took a deep breath and then I unleashed hell. The night they thought they had won is the night their world ended. "I have something to say," I announced, my voice clear and steady. All eyes turned to me. Richard's face paled. The Thompsons looked shocked. The crowd went silent. This was it, the final act, the moment of truth. I took a deep breath and then I unleashed hell. For years, the Thompsons have built an empire on lies, fraud, and the broken dreams of others. They portray themselves as pillars of society, generous philanthropists, but behind closed doors, they are monsters. A gasp rippled through the room. Richard stumbled backward, knocking over a table of champagne glasses. The Thompsons' faces were masks of fury. "I have spent the last year documenting their crimes," I continued, my voice growing stronger with each word. "I have gathered evidence of their tax evasion, their fraudulent investments, their attempts to silence anyone who dared to cross them." I gestured to the journalist, who nodded and signaled to her camera crew. They began to film. "And I have something else," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Something that will show you the true depths of their depravity." I paused for effect, letting the tension build to an unbearable level. Then I spoke the words that would shatter their world forever. "I have a video of the act, the violation, the darkness they tried to bury." A collective gasp filled the room. The Thompsons' faces turned ashen. Richard collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands. At that moment, the doors of the ballroom burst open, and the authorities flooded the room. They moved quickly, surrounding the Thompsons and placing them under arrest. The crowd erupted in chaos. People screamed, pointed, and whispered. The Thompsons' carefully constructed facade had crumbled, revealing the ugly truth beneath. As the authorities led them away in handcuffs, their eyes met mine. There was no anger, no hatred, only a chilling emptiness. Their power was gone, their empire had collapsed, they had lost everything. The next few days were a whirlwind. The news of the Thompsons' arrest dominated every headline. The video was leaked to the public and the world recoiled in horror. Their victims came forward, sharing their stories of abuse and exploitation. The Thompsons' assets were seized, their businesses were shut down, and their reputation was destroyed. They became pariahs, shunned by everyone they had ever known. I watched it all unfold from a distance, a sense of cold satisfaction washing over me. The pain they had inflicted on me, the suffering they had caused so many others, had finally been avenged. They lost everything. I just smiled. The trial was a spectacle. The evidence was overwhelming, and the Thompsons had no defense. They were found guilty on all counts and sentenced to decades in prison. Their reign of terror was finally over. In the aftermath, I disappeared. I sold my house, changed my name, and moved to a remote island far away from the reach of the Thompsons and their associates. I wanted to start over, to build a new life free from the shadow of the past. I spent my days swimming in the ocean, hiking in the mountains, and writing in my journal. I found peace in solitude, a sense of healing that I never thought possible. Sometimes I would think about the Thompsons, rotting away in their prison cells. I didn't feel any joy or triumph, only a quiet sense of closure. Revenge isn't sweet, it's necessary, it's a primal instinct, a way to restore balance to a world that has been tilted off its axis. It's not about seeking pleasure in the suffering of others, it's about holding people accountable for their actions. It's about standing up for what is right, even when it's difficult, even when it's dangerous. It's about survival. The world doesn't always give you justice. Sometimes you have to take it. And when you do, you have to be prepared to face the consequences. You have to be willing to sacrifice everything, to risk everything, to ensure that the scales of justice are balanced. My story isn't a fairy tale, it's a cautionary tale. It's a reminder that even the most powerful people can be brought down, that even the darkest secrets can be exposed. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, the ability to overcome even the most horrific abuse and betrayal. It's about knowing when to forgive and when to seek retribution. It's also a story of the darkness. It is never the answer, but sometimes it is the only language some people understand. I survived, I rebuilt, and I found a measure of peace. They lost, they crumbled, They faced the consequences of their actions. They paid their debt to society. And I finally was free. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.